Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Inside Pitch, the private Facebook group where screenwriters, creatives, filmmakers meet to ask and answer questions and exchange ideas and information on the craft and business of movie making. I am Ramesh Santanam, an administrator of this group that was started and is run by Christopher Lockhart. Our other admin is Steve Enlow. Chris and I usually do these interviews together, but he is on vacation. We have a very special guest today. He is storyboard artist Todd Anderson, who has been in the business for more than 30 years. It's safe to say that the Coen Brothers have not made a movie without Todd since Raising Arizona. We're talking Fargo, Miller's Crossing, Barton Fink, Oh Brother Where Art Thou, The Man Who Wasn't There, The Big Lebowski, The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, and the Oscar-winning No Country for Old Men, to name just a few. He also has storyboarded numerous other movies and shows, including Men in Black, The Addams Family, Addams Family Values, Confessions of a Dangerous Mind, Paul, Whip It, The Peanut Butter Falcon, The Old Man and the Gun, M. Night Shyamalan's Servant, and The Nice Guys, The Predator, and Edge, the last three for writer-director Shane Black. Todd storyboarded Ethan Coen's new movie Drive Away Dolls, which hits theaters in September. He also is the author of the book The Big Lebowski, The Official Storyboards, which is right here, and it's a terrific book. Okay, so we're trying something different today. Usually this is where we link to our guests elsewhere, but Todd happens to be sitting right next to me. So I'm going to adjust this camera so we are both in the shot and have a discussion about his fascinating career and the art of storyboarding and answer some of your questions. Here we go. Todd, welcome.
Hey.
So,
how are you?
This is Todd, everyone.
It's been so long since I've seen you, Ramesh.
I know. It's only
oh my gosh. And he's roping me into an interview.
I know. It's fitting. We met here 4 or 5 years ago.
That's right.
Right in this place.
In Hollywood, California.
Exactly. So let's start.
And now we have barking dogs today.
I know. But it's the last time we did one here, there were barking dogs there too. So it kind of goes with when I interviewed Shane.
Whatever you say, you're the boss.
So that's because Smitty is jealous of Wonder Bread.
Wonder Bread.
Yes.
Yeah, that's my dog.
Wonder Bread's his
my
dog.
And it's spelled B-R-E-D. Wonder Bread, not like as in the
bread.
They bread. No, this is like as he's been bred as a Wonder Bread.
So let's go with how you started. What got you into drawing?
My mom taught me how to draw when I was very young, and I'm talking like 2 and 3 years old. Because I would watch television all the time. That's what I watched. And what I did is I watched television, and then I would go back and draw it. And when I was a child, television was just hitting its stride where everybody had a television set. And it became an incredible magic babysitter for moms. And so you could just park a kid in front of a television, walk away from them, and they'd be fine. And but what I did is I would start drawing what I saw, like Superman. When the George Reeves Superman was one of the very early television shows that I remember drawing. And then I learned how to draw action by watching Cleveland Browns football. Should we move the dogs outside?
No, I'll take. Go ahead.
And then what I did is I would draw it and I would bring it back to my mom, who was an artist. She was a professional artist. And what she did, she hand tinted oil with oils. There were photographs at a studio called Olin Mills, and that's what she did. And I would just draw stuff and she would critique it. She'd say, well, that guy's arm's too long, or might want to learn how to do the profile. She just took it in little bits and pieces and corrected it for me. So we should be able to do something with this dog because I'm having a hard time concentrating.
Okay. You keep talking. We'll be right back.
And that's what I did. Through my formative years, I would draw a television show that I really was inspired by. And most of the stuff that I drew as far as action was from the Cleveland Browns football. And that's how I learned how to get balls in the air, passing, because they even back then they were pretty good at covering a football game. I could understand how they timed, like for instance, a receiver goes downfield and they pass it to him and then they cut to him. Well, I learned a lot from that. And then, at that time in history, the major studios were coming down and they would sell their movies to the television stations. And that's what they ran all night long. Movies on Friday and Saturday and Sunday, they would run movies all night long, and then they'd run them in the afternoon. These are all Hollywood movies that were very famous, and they were still famous because they didn't realize that there was a market out there for used movies. Because the studios, when they got finished running the movie, they just threw it in the vault. But when like MGM went down, they sold their whole library to a television syndicate who sent out like Little Rascals, and Three Stooges was one of the more popular ones we watched in the afternoon. But that's how I got acclimated to all the famous movies that I kind of know about, is that I was a television hound. That's all I did was watch television whenever I could. And in the summertime, that's what I did. I stayed up all night watching movies, and then I'd sleep till noon and drive my parents crazy, and then I watched movies in the afternoon. And then when I got in college, the VHS boom happened, and you could suddenly see stuff at any time you wanted, and that was fantastic. I started watching all sorts of movies that I wanted to see, and this is when I was in college and I started making movies, because I took a lot of film classes. But that's how I learned how to draw. That's how I did it.
And then you went to college, right?
Yeah, when I was in college, I really didn't understand what I wanted, but I took, as a communications degree, I started taking a lot of film classes. And this was at Wright State University in Dayton. And I was able to start making my own movies. And I had a very good Super 8 camera, which was a Nikon, and big lens, great lens. All the other guys were strapped out. A few women in that class, they were strapped out with 16 millimeter because it cost a lot of money to do that, and to cut it together. But not me, man. I had Super 8. Super 8 was my god. And since I had good equipment and I had a reasonably good editing block, I was able to make these things so they look better than 16 millimeter. Okay. And then I started noticing, because I started reading books about making movies, like how certain directors storyboarded and how they established their movies visually first. And so I tried it. And lo and behold, when I tried it, things happened. I started noticing a huge difference in my movies. I did 3 or 4 Super 8 movies to everybody's 1/16 millimeter. And even when guys were doing VHS, I was in Super 8. And my eyes are really good, so it wasn't hard to cut it back then. But I did notice that if I storyboarded a movie, it looked much better visually and balanced than something that wasn't storyboarded. It had a tone about it. And I get asked all the time, what do you mean by tone? I was even asking Shane the other day, I said, what do you tell people? Because I'm a tone hound. Yeah. That's what I look for first. In a script, movie, I'm looking for the tone. Tone is what drives the character, and it sets the precedent on how that movie works. And when I was in college, I became very good at finding tone in movies, and emulating the tone and putting it into my picture. And when I met the brothers, I had showed them my Super 8 movie that made a couple $1,000, because I would send it out to film festivals and I would always win. And I thought, this is a good way to make a movie, good way to make a living. Yeah. That's in your money, And you're talking about a guy that got fired from a lot of jobs, because it wasn't very good. But all of a sudden I started making movies, and I'd send it out. If I needed $350, I'd send it out to a film festival and I'd win. And I was as good at racket. And that's how I started.
Okay. And then you graduated from Wright in communications?
Communications, yes.
Okay. And then
I've done quite a few films.
And then what prompted you to, because from there you had this odyssey to Texas, right?
Yeah. One of my friends lived in Waco and they were making movies in Texas because of incentives. So I just packed my car and went to Texas, and I got a job on a commercial, and it was Big Red Cola or something, And then in Dallas at that time, nearby Dallas, they were making a made-for-TV movie, which I shoehorned my way into, and I worked on that, learned a lot, and again, it was my hand that got me hired.
Okay. My
drawing hand, and the production designer, name was Greg Melton, and I can't remember what the director's name is, but anyway, they weren't hitting it off. So I got a call in the middle of the night to come over to the hotel and draw some furniture and put it into these photographs of the locations. So I just did sketches, and then that settled it. They were able to get along because he was visualizing how this room is going to look with certain couches. It was all Polaroids. There was a mountain of them, I remember. And I was working all night penciling these. I still got those drawings somewhere. And but it settled the deal. And they got along after that. And then I was able to stay on as a set decorator, lead man, some other job, because they only paid me $300 a week, and we had to do everything. There was another guy and it's made for TV. Right. It was a hideous schedule, it was terrible.
But he had a great cast, right?
Well, Robert Mitchum was the lead actor, right, and Wilford Brimley was the other schmo, right, and then Kathleen York was the girl, okay, in the thing, and it was a CBS made for movie of the week television. Okay. And the way they did that back then is the producer would make two of those things and give CBS two screenings. They're always in sweeps because they have Robert Mitchum in them, and then they would show it in Europe in theaters, because they had Robert Mitchum. It's called Thompson's Last Run. I can't find a copy of it anywhere, and I'm in it playing pool with Robert Mitchum, which made everything all right back home when I sent pictures of me and Robert Mitchum. And my parents thought, well, maybe he's okay then.
Because Mitchum was the guy.
Was big, man. He made 100 movies.
Right.
100 some odd movies, and he was a big star in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and this is in the 84 or 80, 85, I think. But he was 70, and he was still great, man. He was phenomenal. Because I got yelled at all the time. People hated me, and because we had to work 65-hour weeks and get paid $300. But I was there to work. I didn't realize that everybody could be so hateful, and it really was discouraging. But I hung on, And once I got over the fact that if they fire me, then that's the way it's going to be. But there was a lot of stuff that happened on that picture where I got to play through my mistakes and learn. But I wasn't a storyboard artist on that picture. And I thought, this glorious movie business is not so glorious after all. And
but Mitchum was good to you.
Mitchum was a great guy. He saw me getting yelled at, and he was always, hey, don't worry about that, man. I'll take care of this director. And the director directed Kansas City Bomber, which I don't know where he's at now. Hal Tressler was the DP. I remember that. Yeah. And but this was 21-day schedule. It's kind of like today's schedules, which are 21 days. And it was television, and man, it was just like smash and grab. All sorts of stuff. I get, my learning curve was so steep you would get a nosebleed on that show. But then it was right after that I met Joel and Ethan.
Right.
Things changed.
How did that happen? How did you wind up meeting the Coen Brothers?
When I was in Texas and I was working on as a piecemeal guy on Dallas the early years, my friend who we were abused together, Roger Bell, on Thompson's Last Run, he had a lot of experience as a set decorator. He was really good. He still is. And he had heard me on the phone because I had heard from the production manager that Joel and Ethan Coen were down there in Phoenix. Those Coen boys, that's what they called them. Nobody liked them. And everybody gave them a lot of shit. You know, those guys, because they had done really well with Blood Simple. So naturally, everybody hates them. And you know, I casually said something to the auditor, Barbara Ann Stein, on that picture, and she says, "Well, the Coen boys are down in Phoenix," and there was a really good-looking girl in there, man, and I went after her, and I said, "We gotta," you know, I was really after her, and she says, "Well, I'm going down with Barbara to Phoenix to work with those Coen boys," and I said, "Those Coen boys," because I'd seen Blood Simple twice, and I thought these guys are the guys that I want to work with, and so Roger heard that, Roger Bell. He says, "Let's go." And I said, "Okay, I don't think I want to go. I have no money." And he goes, "Don't worry, I got my dad's credit card." And we jumped in his truck. And we had called them. And they said for us not to come down there because they needed locals.
Oh, okay.
That's the way the rules are, you know. But we did. We went down there and pestered them. And Ethan wrote about this in my book. You can read his far more interesting and true story about this.
When you kindly put me in touch with him, he did. It was very entertaining when I talked to him about it.
He changes it every time. Their idea of this really happened, J. Todd.
Right.
It's always embellished, you know. Life is too boring for them, let me tell you. And anyway, we went down there and I did an audition for Joel, and he says, "Well, this looks pretty good. This looks pretty good." So we went out to the car. We didn't get hired. And so we were sitting in the car, and then I was sitting in the car, and Roger came back out and he goes, "I think I got hired." And I thought, "Oh, great." I'm sitting here, and it was the coldest that Phoenix had ever been. You know, it was really cold. And he was all excited, and I thought, you know, what about me? You know. And then Jane Muskie, bless her heart, she's a production designer. She comes out, and we were backing out, and she puts her hand on the hood of the car. She goes, "You, storyboard artist." Because they had said that Ethan was in New York, but he was there. But Joel was the only one there, and she arranged for me to meet Joel because they were trying to send us away. And she goes, "Listen, Joel liked your stuff. We want to stay in touch." Well, we didn't have cell phones or anything back then. So she goes, "Why don't you stay in our apartment? I have an apartment here in Carefree in Scottsdale, and then I'm moving to Carefree, the studio. Stay there, you know." We did. There's food in the refrigerator. It's great. And all we had to do is get on the phone every day and call. "Hey, we got our jobs." "No, stop bugging us." And so then they threw us out. They said, you know, "Get out of there." The producer, Jim Jacks, bless his heart, he's gone, but that's his apartment. "You guys got to get out of there. You're embarrassing us." So we ended up staying in the desert in pickup truck, the heater on all night long. And then we would go get food and what's left of our money. Can of beans. We didn't know how to open it. It was terrible. And then we had food from the Indian reservation. It was wooden sticks from somewhere to make a fire. And we found out it had lead paint on it. We were sick. Then we go back to the apartment and break in because we knew the combination. We would sleep there all day in the sun, and then we go out and beg for food in Scottsdale and take our quarters and put it in the payphone and say, "Hey, we got our jobs yet?" "No!" Click. This went on for about a week, I think. I don't know. And then it snowed in the desert, and one of the girls that I flirted with at a Scottsdale restaurant came and rescued our sorry asses and took us back and warmed us up. And so our boyfriend comes home. He doesn't like that, so he sent us right back out to the desert. We get on the payphone, and next day we go in there and shower, and hey, we got our And finally, one day, after a couple phone calls, we've been looking for you guys. Where are you?
Uh-huh.
And so we went in. We got our jobs on Raising Arizona,
And you storyboarded that, right?
and I did. It was my first storyboard movie, and they gave us scripts, which I had never gotten before. And I thought, wow, this is a good script because they put the baby on the car and drive off. And aside from getting, I had a bicycle. I didn't have a car. Aside from getting hit on my bicycle by some old lady who ran me down, and another guy ran into my friend's truck. It was a pretty good experience because I knew the movie was going to be great, and it was. And it took a couple of, maybe almost seemed like 2 years for it to come out. But when I finally saw it, it was one of the biggest moments of my life, seeing what I had drawn, because they drew everything. And we compared notes when we were doing it because, Joel was pretty adamant about picking up where Hitchcock left off. And I had read all about Hitchcock's methods of drawing. I used them in my movies. And they saw my little movie that I won all the money with, and they liked that. And they just told me in the beginning, they said, we have to decide whether we like you or not. And a couple of days later, they said, well, we've decided that we like you, J. Todd. So I think we're going to keep you around, for a couple of weeks. And it did. We went in every night, had a session around the table with Joel and Ethan, Barry Sonnenfeld and I. And it was amazing. It was just quite the experience. Those guys, even back then, knew exactly what they wanted. And I was able to contribute some, with my experience of storyboarding, and we hit it off. It's a good deal,
Yeah.
I'm still working with them today, so it's a long time.
Ethan spins a good yarn about you. It was like he was sitting out in the desert around a fire, eating baked beans.
Well, it was terrible. We were trying to get that can open, and we didn't have a can opener. It was really hideous, Sorry ass ex-Boy Scouts. I'm not doing it. Yeah.
But then Raising Arizona becomes a hit.
Yeah, man, you're nothing without a hit movie, really. And it changed my life, just like that. My life changed. It's a funny thing what a hit movie will do for anybody, I found out that most producers will go through movies, and if they see your name on the credits, they'll be calling you if it's a hit movie. And that's why they call you, because you're on the credits. They want some of that to rub off. And I was very fortunate because when that movie came out, it had legs and it did really well. And there was a nice article by Terry, his name, he was a film critic in Dayton, and he did a nice article on me about that movie doing so well.
Right.
And people would come up to me and they'd say, I hate that movie. I just hate it. This is the worst movie. What's going on with movies? This is really terrible. And then it seemed like in the same 15 minutes, another person would come up. I love that movie. I love that movie so much. And that's when I experienced, they don't boo nobodies, man. They just don't. And when you have a hit movie and people hate it, it still has momentum. And especially if they offset it with a whole group of people that love it. And that was my first experience of getting that up my nose. And then because that movie grew so quickly and did so well, and people would see it and they saw the article, my life changed instantly. I'm just an artist here.
Right.
I just drew the picture. I'm just a storyboarder. But it really changed my life, I was able to get chicks faster. No, I really was. And
but you started working with them. You worked with them throughout.
I told them very early on that I wanted to be with them. They were the next big thing, I thought. They were the tone and voice that spoke to me as a guy that wanted to be in movies, and they were. Because, Frank Capra, he was too old. Alfred Hitchcock was dying. Spielberg and those guys, they were off and running. They didn't need guys like me. But here I was at the right place at the right time with Joel and Ethan Coen. Right. And I took advantage of it, It wasn't luck. I chased them like a guy would chase a girl to get a date, man. Right. And I got there. and thanks to Roger Bell's help through persistence, and I never hardly get anything right, but I got that right. You know, I did. I got that right, and I've still got it right. Yes, they're still two great guys, and they've done exactly what I thought they were going to do. You know, it's become the next big thing, and I was very fortunate to be involved in that, and as their visual guy, you know.
Can you talk a little bit about Fargo? Because not only did you draw Fargo, but you have a wonderful cameo.
Yeah, I get to run in the field and they kill me.
He, in case you don't know, in Fargo, after Steve Buscemi kills the state trooper and he's pulling him the car that passes by.
That's me.
J. Todd.
I can do that take. It's on the other side of the car, but I'll do it.
Right. And then the car turns over. Peter Stormare follows you
and shoots me dead.
And shoots you
and
dead.
Then Fran comes in and steals the whole movie.
Right.
But I made the poster face down in the snow.
Exactly. But can you talk about, before we get into drawing that, but also that whole scene, because you have a wonderful story about, it took 3 takes, right? And it was shot on a frozen lake.
As I remember it,
right.
It was 3 takes. And it was a very warm spring up there. And they were shooting on these vast lakes that they have plenty of up there in North Dakota. And my deal was to clamber out of the car, run, and then I had a plunger in my hand. That was a squib that went off of my jacket.
Right.
And
I
then
see that one shot, right?
Yeah. And they were on the other side of the fence. They're yelling out to me, "We're shooting you now," you know. Right. And Joel was doing that. And there was a walkie-talkie inside the car, and it was upside down. And the grip, or whoever the guy was, he would run up with like a grinder wheel that had a rubber tire on it, and they would spin that back wheel. Okay. So when they call action, the tire was spinning, because we never wrecked the car.
Okay.
Contrary to what everybody says, we never wrecked that car.
Okay.
And then I could hear the walkie go off, and Joel would say, "Get out of the car, Jerry, get out of the car." And I did. And I would run, and then I'd fall down as instructed, but it was no good. Right. Then first time I fell into the water, in the ice, you know, and then they had to hook me out with a grappling hook.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I wasn't close to being drowned, but it was cold.
Right.
And it was like I was halfway into this lake. And so then they had to move the whole production down about 50 feet, because back then you couldn't go in there and sweep out the foot tracks with digital. Right. You had to move it. So then the next one, I botched that one up just like the one before. I could tell everybody's getting irritated because it was cold and real late, 4 in the morning. And those grips are out there freezing to death, and everybody was, started getting cranky, and they were cranky at me. And I never acted before, except for college films. So then the next one, the walkie goes off. I'm in there. They got me kind of the last jacket, when running out of squibs, because this is small production. And I ran as I heard them on the radio. Joel was mad. Get out of the car, Jason! Get out of that car! And oh gosh, he's pissed off now. And so I'm trying to get out of the car, and I can't. I just run on my shoulder and get it as hard as I can, to the point where I'm almost hurting it. And then finally it scrapes open, and then I crawl out and I look around, because I know he's mad. Joel's mad. And then I run and I stumble and then I fall. And Joel says, "That's the one." And what those guys did is they stacked snow up on my door so I couldn't get out. He did it on purpose. I don't know whose idea it was, probably Joel and Ethan's, but
they pranked you.
Oh, they did. And they got exactly what they wanted, because I was panicking. And that's that scene. That shot you see is that. And then we shot a couple insert close-ups, to fill in. But that's how that scene happened.
And how did they just say, "Hey, you want to do this cameo"?
Oh, Joel said that.
Okay.
We were in the hotel room drawing the scene.
Okay. And
Joel, just for no reason whatsoever, he goes, "I want you to play the guy that gets killed." And the girl was a craft service girl at the time, and
the one in the car upside down.
Yeah, and the guys, they prepped me with, "You're a coward, J. Todd." They would, "Yeah, I'll take that coffee. That's fine. You're a coward, J. Todd. You are a coward. And both of them, as usual, would team up on me. Oh, you're a coward. You suck. You're running away from that girl. They're killing you. You're a coward. But funny, after that movie came out, nobody really said that I was a coward.
No. But it's a memorable scene. It's a
great scene, man. I started my acting career.
Right.
And,
you had, and of course, you had another cameo in Shane's The Nice Guys.
Yeah, those are real Screen Actor Guild credits, because I talked and I was there all day long.
You're the
And,
guy
I was in
it.
Confessions of a Dangerous Mind for George with Brad and Matt. I'm the idiot, idiot spy, play myself. Yeah, so I've got a handful of credits, and I appreciate them. It's been fun.
Sure.
I just don't make as much money as an actor as I do an artist, as an artist, storyboard artist. That's the only reason why I haven't become an actor full time. It's too hard of a life.
And in case you're wondering where he is in The Nice Guys, he is, when they're doing the protest on the steps, he's the one smoking when Russell Crowe.
Smoking guy.
Yeah, smoking guy. So let's talk about storyboarding and what is, for you, you've told me that you don't read, when they send you the scripts, you don't really read them thoroughly. You just sort of glaze over that.
Part of that is because I'm lazy. And 120 pages of screenplay is usually pretty difficult to read because you never know what you're getting into. And because I've read so many of them through the years, I look for certain things in movies, where things happen, what page they happen, how many pages you got. So what I do is I kind of, if I see there's going to be 2.5 pages of dialogue, I kind of graze through that.
Okay.
And then I'm looking for things that are happening, like Sid Field called them plot points, and I'm looking for specifically the first 5 pages, something happening there, a transition from page 20 to 30 into the second act, and I want to see something kind of working in that second act that springboards us into like page 80 or 90, and then I want to see everything established properly for the end. And that's what I'm looking for. I'm not in there reading every word of dialogue. I'm not. In fact, the brothers, I always was aware that they were not even close to being done when they would send me a script, and I would just kind of breeze through it and look for it. I'm looking for tone. That's what I'm looking for. I'm a tone hound. And once you get your hands around that tone in a picture, you're going to have an easier time of drawing it, because if you can figure that out, then you'll know how to build the action and make it work. If you're specifically good on tone, that's the best starting point on establishing anything. And I'm able to visualize quicker if I do that. Everything in my mind is just like, it becomes visual. And the most important thing is you're doing the director's film, not yours. So you don't want to come up with your ideas. You want to try to fish around and get what makes him work. Like, I kind of know Shane. I worked with him several times. The brothers, I instantly knew when I got with them. But if it was a new director, I'd have to go in there and kind of school myself and start saying, oh, this is kind of the direction he likes to go in. And so then when you're experimenting with them, trying to get them, how about this visual thing? I'll start extremely on one side, and then I'll do extremely on another side, and then somewhere in the middle I'll drop it in. I wish my life I could do that on everything, but in a storyboard session, I'm trying to sequester what makes that scene that scene. What is this scene about? That's the most important thing about is getting a visual motif about what's happening. Is what is this scene about? And you can't really lose on that if you figure that out. You really can't. And what it essentially is when you're building this thing, you start from the middle and work your way up. And then when you draw, of course, you go back to the beginning. But once you figure out where the middle is on that scene and what motivates that scene, then you can put it in a big old puzzle called a movie, and you can move on to the next one, because you want to be careful not to give away the beans, and then, I am not good with movies that are just people talking. I hate those. I'm sure There is a place for them in this world, but it's not for me. I like exposition. I like to tell pictures with stories. I mean, tell stories with pictures. And there's really no use to having me around to draw a bunch of talking heads because I'll get bored. And once in a while you can take that stuff and turn it around, but most of the time you can't. It's just people talking. I'd rather show the guys. The guy be sitting there saying, then they hammered his hand into the board, and then they strung him up. I'd rather show that.
Right.
What kind of nails are you using?
Right.
Is it a big hammer?
Right.
Does this guy have it coming?
Okay. And
these are the kind of questions, and I ask a lot of questions.
Right.
So
one of the things that I was talking to Shane earlier, and he said one of the things about you is you listen a lot.
Listening is a skill, man.
And that is for you as a storyboard artist, half the job is listening. So can you tell why it's important?
You got to figure out who you're working with. You got to figure out their style and try to agree with them. I think this is where he's going. And then I'll draw it very quickly and say, is this what you're looking for? There's all sorts of ways of doing that. And listening is the reason why you do it. My family says I'm not a good listener, but I don't know. I've been at it for quite a while, and I have found out through the years that there's a couple elements and conventions in life that work, and listening skills. As a sound man told me on that made-for-TV movie, they yell at you all the time. I hear you in my earphones. He says, why don't you try listening? And I've been through college. I thought, what is this guy saying? But when I got with Joel and Ethan, I noticed that they were so focused on what they were doing, my listening skills had to advance. And as that sound man told me, you never stop learning how to listen. It's like I'm a pilot. It's like flying. You never stop learning. Listening skills are a continuing skill that you learn every day of your life. And one of the reasons is Michael Jeter pointed out many years ago, the actor, you dial into the person you're listening to. You don't listen to them like you listen to Phil or Fred or Sally. You listen to them as they are. So you have a job, and that's to get to know that person. And it's not because you want to like them or anything. You have to get to know them. And as an artist, you have to get to know them as an artist. What moves them? What motivates them? Like every shot in a movie, instead of just going out and hosing it down, you should be motivated. Shots should be motivated. And an unmotivated shot is a serious sin in this business. It really is. And that's why you plug in your listening cap and you say, you just get in there and you listen as hard as you can. You don't miss anything. I take notes constantly. When I'm drawing when I'm figuring things out, I will, if I'm smelling a good shot, I will take notes on that shot. When I go back to trace it or draw it, this stuff all counts. And it all counts when you're in a session. All that stuff comes down immediately. So you have to be a good listener.
Does listening also help you understand the director better?
Absolutely. You learn the director. And you learn what he responds to or she responds to. You don't really want a reaction unless they're acting. Now, Joel and Ethan used to act stuff out, but what you want them to do is respond. Yes, that's it. There was a scene in Barton Fink where we go down the drain, and the guys are standing by as I was drawing it. I had a clipboard and I was standing up there. And I said, like this? Yeah, that's it. Yeah. And it was just a step-by-step into the drain. And then when I showed it to them, we were going through it, and they're going, yes, yes. And then we went down the drain into blackness. Yes. Well, I obviously listened right because I got the shot right. And when they say, that's the shot, you're there. I don't mess with those shots too much. When they say, yes, that's it. When I go back and doctor them up and touch them up, finish them up, I don't mess with them. I just try to clean them up a little bit, maybe put some clothes on people or stuff like that.
And you Of course, each director has their own thing. Ethan says, like, before they come to you, they give you little thumbnails.
Ethan draws really fabulous thumbnails.
Right.
You know, they're really great.
And that's what you work off of?
Well, it helps.
Okay.
Because I can understand what their shot is. There's several ways to attack these problems, several ways. And one of the easiest ways to attack it is to do an overhead and figure out where the camera is. And then I don't ever have any fear of going over the line, you know,
Okay.
because I know exactly where that camera is and I know where that line is. And most people will say, put that camera right here, and then I see it. And then all I have to do is adjust the azimuth on it, up or down. Like in Raising Arizona, Joel, one of the first things he told me, he says, what we're going to do here, J. Todd, is it's never going to be the average place you put a camera, like most people do. It's either going to be a little high or a little low, or even more of that. And that's why Raising Arizona looks the way it does, because Joel's specific, and this is direction, man. His specific request for me is to start attacking this stuff from that perspective. And that's what I did on Raising Arizona. But if you can figure out where the camera is and how the shot works, then you can adjust how high it is. Because if you have a 6'5" cameraman, his camera is always going to be where his eyeball is, which will drive you crazy, man. Or if he's a short guy like me, then it's going to be real low. So they were one of the few directors that said this is how they want it to look, and then it just got lit. Now Barry would occasionally try to, want to do a shot here and there, but it was mostly those guys, and I was there to interpret what they wanted until they said yes. So, Ethan could draw a little bit, and they were great, but I could understand a lot of stuff from his, and he still does. His eye lines, and he'll draw every brick on the wall. He will. He'll draw every brick in that wall. And Joel will complain, yeah, he holds me up, man. But you get too much information is never enough when you're storyboarding. And that's why you turn on your listening skills first. You become observant.
Right.
That's what I am. I'm an observer, and I interpret things, and then I turn it in what they want.
Talk a little bit about how you interpret, because you've said you don't come up with the shots. You just
do not come up with the shots.
You interpret what the director wants.
I try to close in on what they want, and once I get that magic drawing, they say that's it.
Okay. I
know where everything is. Then I can go back and tidy it up because we make those things for everybody to understand.
Right.
When you get on their sets, everybody is allowed to have storyboards, and everybody's making the same movie. Right. It's no longer people saying stuff. Oh, I don't know what they're doing. Right. We'll see it in dailies or whatever they do now. And but with the brothers, the storyboards were there in a big old tub, and they were packaged with the sides. Okay. So if you were on the ball, man, you got in there when they printed up those. They were half the size of the paper, and people would hang them around their neck across. They put them on their phones, right. And everybody knew what was going on. They were all making the same movie. There was no mindless descriptions of what they're shooting. It's just, they're shooting that. Oh, they're shooting where J. Todd goes down in the snow. Because I drew it. And everybody, I'm the first guy that sees the movie, And that's the way we sequentially did it through the years, is one half step at a time. Just almost like music notes, where you score it. And we scored it we went from script, intelligent version, right, to storyboards, existential version, and a series of steps before we went to the set. And then when we got there, everything was where it's supposed to be. Camera was put down exactly where it was supposed to be, and Roger would light it, or Barry or Bruno, and then when we were on our way, and everything looked pretty much like the storyboard. Right. If you see my book, be sure when you read this book.
This is the book.
Be sure when you look at it that you really understand that this is what everybody saw before we shot the movie.
Right.
People don't realize this was all before. This is weeks and weeks and weeks before. It's not after,
Right.
That's a popular misnomer. People don't think that.
Right.
But the contingent is that's before, and that's how it ended up.
usually how many, for lack of a better word, drafts or drawings do you go through to get to from interpreting till you finally come to say, aha? I'm guessing with the Coen Brothers, it's quicker.
Well, the idea is you want to move fast. You want to draw as minimalist as you can,
Right.
because what goes on, the magic that happens in a storyboard session, is if they're cooking fast, then you're making the movie as they go.
Right.
And the interesting element that I found out through the years is that we would do as many drawings as setups in a day sometimes. Not all, that's not a rule, but the thing is you want those guys cooking. You don't want them interrupted. You want them laying it down as they're seeing this movie in their head, and you got to keep up with them, And the important thing is always that if you can, stay about a half step or a quarter step in front of them in the thought process. Try to meet them, shake their hands when you're getting there. But the deal is, the magic happens when they're making the movie and you draw as fast as you can to keep up with them. And then you have to remember all that stuff, right, because they constantly worry, I sure don't remember all this, Most of the time I did.
How early in the process are you brought in with before shooting begins, everything?
As soon as I got a wet script, man,
really?
I'll take it. And just give it to me. And Joe and Ethan, they were pretty nice about sending me really early drafts of stuff. And again, I had this process where I didn't read into it to, make suggestions. I was ready for them, and that's the whole thing. I just asked them a lot of questions. I always tell these crazy students, I say that don't listen to that. There's no such thing as a dumb question. They're gobs of dumb questions. Make sure your questions are really good so you can get results. That's what you want from a question, is a result.
From the directors.
From the directors. And if you're a good listener and you know how to shut up, which I have a hard time with, sometimes if you know when to shut up, it's better. But always be listening, always be listening.
And when
keep your ears open all the time,
And when you're taking notes, what exactly are you jotting down when you're talking?
They'll make a detail.
Right.
Like Joe and Ethan, they would make a detail of he's wearing one of those Gruen watches, Todd, and it's an insert of a Gruen watch. And they're specific about that. Gruen watch. I'll go find the Gruen watch and I'll put Gruen on there. If they're specific, like the dude in Big Lebowski, he had a Dodge. It was one of those Corinthian leather Dodges, and I drew it all the way through. But they changed it. The car guy talked them into going to a Torino. So, I went back in. Occasionally there's a Dodge in there. It was a real specific Dodge. It's one of their fancy schmancy Dodges at the time. LeBaron, that's what it was. It was a LeBaron with portholes. And the dude was driving a LeBaron. But then somehow they talked him into a 4-door Torino, And they brought those cars in. And incidentally, I think the best stunt in movie history is in that movie where Don Hewitt wrecks that Torino one take. The dude's smoking, but there's an incredible shot of Don wrecking
the car.
It's not Don Hewitt, it's Jerry Hewitt. Yeah, that's his brother. Jerry planted that car so perfect. I cannot watch that movie without going, that is amazing, man. Anyway, those are the details I would put because they meant a lot of. Most people just draw a car. That's fine. I can just draw a soap bar with wheels, But when people give me notes, make sure it has portholes. Okay, I'll put that on because a lot of those details when you're drawing, or even if you don't draw, you'll forget them. But when you're in a storyboard session, all these details start gelling, and they gel because they're becoming picture. You got to go to picture no matter what. This is a movie. And when you go to picture, make sure you have everything there because you will forget it. You will forget it. So that's what we're there for. We're there to step by step bring in all these selected details and make a movie. you know, and that's why their movies are so visually tight, because they don't mess around, man. They go for the details, and there's people make fun of it, fine, but it looks great. To me, I love it, you know.
And you're also very specific. You know, you and I, we've joked about hand on gun.
Hand on gun, man, greatest insert ever made.
But even there, it's like you're very specific, whether it's a revolver or a pistol or.
You know, I had to learn how to draw guns, and the Glock 19 is the easiest one to draw. But a revolver's
Really
in a Western,
Right.
you know, you got to draw a revolver. You
Right.
have to. I mean, that's the
So when you did
1871 Colt, you know, that they constantly use in Westerns. I mean, there was a Navy revolver that they used quite a bit in the spaghetti Westerns.
Right.
But I try to get that because I hate drawing guns, but I'll draw, you know.
So Buster Scruggs, you must have had to draw a bunch.
A lot of guns. I hung out with the armor quite a bit.
Okay.
I went over there and he gave me a catalog of all the guns we used. And Shane did this movie called Edge.
Right.
And I got pretty good at drawing Winchesters, you know, 73s and 76s, I think. I know a lot about guns, although I'm not really a gun guy. I just know them because I draw them, you know. And our culture is fascinated by them. So a hand-on gun insert really propels a movie, you know.
Right. It is the most. What's the other most common insert you do? Hand-on gun.
Let's see. You know, boy, you know, I'm always spouting off about it, and I can't remember. Watch. That's a pretty common insert, you know, because that's how they manipulate time in movies, literally. A hand on a gear shift.
Right. But yeah, speaking of that, we're gonna do this, but hopefully it'll work. Let's see.
You know, what is that? A movie where Vin Diesel's in, and they're always making movies about, you know,
Fast and Furious.
Yeah, there's always people got like 15-speed transmissions in those cars because
Right.
they just keep shifting them. You know, it's a good way to get yourself into something. You know, cutaways and inserts are cheap, but if you're really skilled, a cutaway and an insert will propel that story forward. It will, you know.
We're gonna just show a few of his storyboards to see how detailed they are. Hopefully this will work. There we go. I'll put you this and see. So this is a shot from Miller's Crossing.
Oh man, this is getting back there.
Right,
You know,
and
this is the Thompson Jitterbug.
This is when he's on the bed.
And they were very detailed about Danny Boy was the song.
Right.
And we even played it a couple times.
And I noticed in your up there, you do have the chandelier, but you do have the rest of it off of frame.
Yeah. Well, that was how it was described to me. And they were very specific because, you know, I didn't know too much about a Thompson machine gun, but I learned, and I know that they're heavy.
Right.
And I know they throw a 45 slug. And I was out there when they were doing the tests. And I found out that they kind of dictate what you're doing, the Thompson does, because it rides up. Very historical gun, you know, but they were building the whole scene. The scene was about the Thompson. That's what it was about.
And the you also add sound effects like rat-a-tat.
Oh, I do.
Right.
You got to get the tone in these things, man. Anything that helps people understand, they make fun of it all the time. But it's not a comic book. And I spent half of my life correcting people. This is a storyboard. This is supposed to get you into the mood, tone, and how it works. That's what a storyboard does. You know, it's the first time you see the movie, you know.
And then we're going into the Oscar winner, No Country. And these, you get very detailed on.
I try.
You know.
I try. That was back when I was on paper.
So, and that's the famous shot of the guy getting shot, the driver who picks him up getting shot in the.
Yep. Everything's as specific as they detailed it. And then when I got it right, they said yes. And then you move on. You move on as fast as you can. You're making a movie.
And there's the hand on gear shift.
Hand on gear shift. Anything that propels a movie with a hand is usually going to give you an insert. Ring on a finger.
Right.
There's all sorts of stuff that people use,
Uh-huh.
but it's all inserts.
And here's Moss, Josh Brolin crouching down. And then even little things like gunshots in the window,
Yep.
bullet holes in the window.
Oh yeah, we're specific about how many gunshots there
Right.
is. That's just to get us started. They may add or they may
Right.
take away. But the important part is that you have processed this shot visually, and then you can go in you have your direction on which way you're going to go. That's the most important part. It's not by any means an end all or a hard and fast rule. It means you have processed it visually. You have talked about it, you visualized it, and this is where we're starting,
And this is the famous where he crashes the truck.
Yeah.
And you have the 3 shots, and I found 3 screen captures of those.
Mm-hmm.
But again, you have screech and crash. And,
oh gosh, yeah.
And,
you gotta have it, man.
So,
Their sound designer, Skippy Levestein,
right.
he always liked that stuff, because he's on the back end of the movie, and anything you can do to draw, because when we did our storyboards, they were for everybody,
right.
Everybody on the crew, all the better, because you find people that are really good at what they do, and you just try to stay out of their way, and that's what they were good at, But you have to have the right direction to do that, You surround yourself with people who are better than you are, but it is your job. It's, as they used to really profoundly make it, it's their job to set the direction, and that's what they did.
And then just showing, this is the shootout that was on the screen when Josh Brolin comes out from behind the car shooting, and then that was how it had been drawn up.
Yeah, it was a night sequence, right, for very good reasons, but it was kind of complex, so I didn't make it night. I wanted to make sure you could see the shot. Nowadays with my pad and Procreate, I can make it night and it won't interfere. But back then, throwing ink around, and you could easily kind of lose sight of what's going on. And so I was very careful about that. They were all labeled in the script exterior night, right, so I never worried about that. But Barry was real specific in the Raising Arizona chase scene in the supermarket. Right. This has got to be night, J. Todd. It's got to be night, So I try to make it night,
And then, can you talk a little bit about this, because this is what does in mean, and then what does down mean in those? That's
the big fat arrows are camera, always camera, and that is we're not only pushing in, but we're booming down. And that's what those arrows are all about. And we're going to get a little elevation on it and go into it. That was only 2 frames. It should have been 3. I should have made 3 on that to make sure that you get right on that puddle. I don't know why. Maybe I didn't know where we're going to stop. But the little thin, skinny arrows are always movement of objects, people, things like that. But the big fat arrows are camera, always camera.
Okay.
And that way you have a good idea and you can understand. I see arrows everywhere on people's stuff, and they make them blocky, and all I'm trying to do is make sure people understand. And so one of my methods, it's not my method, we devised it back on Barton Fink, was to make the camera arrows really big, and the little movement arrows are thin spaghetti black lines.
I think you have a movement, like if I go back on...
Yeah, there's a truck that has a skinny line on it.
Let's see, there was... the legs, see the feet, they're up there.
See, they're coming in the frame,
right?
And that's a little skinny arrow. There's no camera. Camera's locked down in that, and that is a better way. Again, we're trying to communicate people what we're going to shoot, what they're going to shoot, and I am doing it as an artist. I am interpreting what they want, and so these things they came along as a necessity to making better communication. After all, I did graduate from college. My diploma says communications.
Right. One question: why is storyboarding important? Why is it important to storyboard a movie?
Well, for one thing, it saves you millions of dollars because you know what you're going to do. You're not standing around waiting, figuring out where to put the camera. Right. Secondly, it'll get you a little closer to what you want because it's already been pre-visualized. as a picture. You're gone to picture already, and you've refined it. You figured it out. You also are able to figure out how many setups you got for the day. And then, like Betsy used to come in my little office, and she would go through stuff and figure out her schedule from the storyboards. And it'll solidify your style. It really will. All of a sudden, if you get what you want in a storyboard and people don't walk away from it, and you're specific about it, then all of a sudden you got a look. And the best screen directors in the world, they had a look, and they did it because they pre-visualized it with drawings, and it's cheap. Although I'm expensive,
Right.
it's cheap when you spend 6 weeks figuring out all these problems that you're going to have anyway, but you can figure them out.
Right.
There's certain things that you can't figure out, like weather and things like that, but you can figure out you need a cover set on this day. What if it rains? All this stuff is because the picture has been, when we finished, we had a little notebook, a spiral ring notebook of all the drawings, just very similar to my book that you buy. And everybody had their hands around that movie. And we knew the schedule, the scenes and setup numbers are up there. And we knew what day it was working on the one line schedule. Everything, the shot list was the storyboard. That's what it was. It wasn't just a shot list that they were throwing down. They were sitting on the toilet doing it, because somebody's beating on the door. You got a shot list? Got a shot list? We had our shot list prepared and ready to go. The shot list always kissed the storyboard and vice versa. That's why you get you control your costs.
Right.
You don't have too many cost overruns. You don't get into 15 and 16-hour days if you storyboard well. And these are fist fights I've had with line producers since I was 25 years old. So you can go ahead and say you don't know what you're talking about, but I do. It ain't bragging if you can do it. We approved it through the years that a good storyboard will make a better movie.
Now, some like the Coens storyboard the entire film.
That's right.
Right.
Yes.
But other directors don't. You go in and you'll just work on
Action.
on action sequences.
Sometimes it's really expensive to storyboard the whole movie, and most line producers won't permit a storyboard line item of how much whatever they pay me, but they do know that if they storyboard action, then the stunt guys can get a hold of it and figure out how to do it, and that saves them money because they do know when they go through the storyboard, they say we need 2 cameras here, we need 3 cameras here. Joe and Ethan were always so specific. They never really needed 2 cameras unless it's an effect, which always takes a little bit more time when you're shooting it. And it'll burn your schedule pretty quick, But if you storyboard it, then they're prepared for it. And if they're not, woe be to them. If they're not, if those professionals are not really prepared to do this because they've had a storyboard. If you can't read a storyboard in the movie business, you shouldn't be in the movie business. Go shoot some screws somewhere, man. Don't shoot them at me.
Okay, so before we get on to my friend's questions.
Oh, we got questions.
We got questions here.
Oh my gosh.
But you started off writing on paper.
I do.
Now you use Procreate.
I use Procreate.
Pros and cons of both?
Procreate is an absolute gift. When I made the transition, everybody was using Photoshop, and it's so slow, Procreate actually took the best elements of my paper drawing and ink and pencil, and it gives you so much latitude. It's cleaner. You don't have eraser shavings. You don't spill the ink all over everything. My process was pretty easy. It was like on a clipboard, I would figure out the shot. If it wasn't no good, I'd throw it on the ground. And then a simple line drawing, where an X was their eyes, that we set the eye line by doing that. And then I would take that pile of drawings back to my transparent drawing board. And then I would take a slug, as I call it. It's a frame with nothing on it. Right. And then I put it on that light table and I'd trace it so it looked better. And then that was where I started. And then the next day, if they okayed that, then I would go back and maybe trace it again, or else throw some ink on it, or some highlights and shading.
Right.
And then it was pretty close to being done, because I have to do 25 and 30 drawings a day sometimes, and they're on a schedule. So you got to get this stuff done fast, and you got to be accurate. And it's not a art show. I see these really beautiful drawings that they make, and no producer is going to let you have that much time. That's concept art. You have to draw as simple, fast, and elegant as you can, and you have to let it go. You have to walk ahead and let it go. And I go back and look at these drawings. I just hate them. But as long as people understand them and you can get the job done, move forward. Movies only do one thing: move forward.
Right.
That's it. They never go backwards. Never. It's like balls to the wall all the time. And the faster you can emulate their speed, tone, and style, the better it's going to be.
And I know you showed me your drawings, and you ask me, do you know what's going on in this?
I do. Because if you can figure it out, then
Right.
anybody can.
Because I remember on one drawing, I was like, this happens, and you're like, no, that's not it, and you fixed it.
And to me, it's so important, because the janitor used to come in. We were doing True Grit or something, and he could barely speak English. And I'd ask him, I'd say, what's happening here? And if he could tell me, I'd usually buy him lunch or something. But it was so important to hear that anybody could read the storyboard. I knew I accomplished my job, that people were going to be able to watch this movie, and then people on the set were going to be able to figure out. So I'd always go for the lowest common, and not the lowest common. You pretty know how to do this. But I will ask the children, what's going on there? Tell me what's going on, And I always give them something. But
someone wants to know, how many sketches did you usually do on a Coen Brothers film?
Well, like Big Lebowski was a short kind of picture as far as drawing, so that was like 850. But on No Country for Old Men, that was like 1,500.
Oh, wow.
A lot. There's a lot of stuff going on. True Grit, same way, 1,500. I can't remember Miller's Crossing, but it's like I tell people constantly, when you get a script and there's one line in there that says Patton's army comes over the hill, that could be a lot of drawings.
Right.
Sure, it's 5 words in a
script.
In a script,
right?
Patton's army come out. I mean, where they're there, but you've got a lot of stuff going on here.
Right.
And Romans are marching into the town.
Right. And
at least in dialogue, specifically, well, this is an OTS,
right.
And he's explaining something,
right?
So it's not going to get too complicated. Not when I did Paul.
Right.
That was a really interesting movie from the standpoint an OTS was no longer an OTS, because sometimes we have puppet,
right.
Sometimes we have CG,
right.
Sometimes we would have the little guy that would come in and he was Paul, and then sometimes it was just, who knows. But that was 5 different versions of an over-the-shoulder shot, and they were specific because the visual effects is going to cost money.
Right.
So they had even a head on a stick,
Right.
So all of a sudden an OTS was no longer just an OTS. It was a big deal, on Paul. But that was a good movie, and it was worth it, because I still make money as an actor in that movie. And people still watch it. It's great.
It's great.
It's wonderful,
Do you have a favorite film genre?
I like film noir a lot.
Okay.
I really like that. I like comedies, loose comedies, man. Gag comedies, visual comedies. You never stop learning on those, what's funny.
Right.
Because, when I did Stepford Wives, they had a bunch of real technical stuff that I storyboarded. It was supposed to be funny, and they cut it out of the picture.
Right.
And I remember talking to Scott Rudin or somebody saying, why didn't you just have a pie fight, You can get, comedy is never heavy. It never is. Comedy is like one of the greatest things in the world, because if people don't laugh, you failed. You can go and hear a band play, and if they're not so good, people will tolerate them.
Right.
A bad comedian, never.
Yeah.
And you don't even need continuity for great comedy, you know. You don't.
Right.
As long as it's funny,
Right.
that's all that counts. Now, you can get into the semantics of that. A good pie in the face is always funny, but why did he get the pie in the face? The setup always kind of, you know, and I'm always studying great comedy, always, you know, especially, you know, I'd be drawing away and the guys would be in there writing something and I'd start laughing and they'd come in and say, what are you laughing at? What are you laughing at? They want to know because I was listening to them, you know, and I like comedies a lot. Although they're so loose, you hardly ever have, like, for instance, if you watch Hudsucker Proxy, the hula hoop sequence, my favorite, it's not a series of loose shots. It's specific. And the kid put Arthur, I don't know where he's at, could do that hula hoop like nobody's business, man. And I remember when we drew that, it was so much fun because it was very technical, but yet it was comedy, you know, it was really funny. And it was just, that was the best part of that movie, you know.
What attributes do you recommend looking for in a beginner's level collaborator when it comes to storyboarding?
I think you got to be able to draw, you know.
Right.
Gotta watch a lot of movies. A lot of movies, not television. That's pretty, you know, specialized. Movies, man. You gotta use references. Those are the two things I look at. We always use references. Shane used a lot of references for movies. Like the other day, you were there when I said Butch Cassidy.
Right.
We knew exactly where that shot was going.
Right.
You know, and those are the things I look for. And they gotta be able to draw quickly and not overdo it. And I make that mistake myself, overdoing it. But it's not an art show, man. It's not an art show. You want to get in there and get the job done.
Can you explain your use? You've told me this. You use black for a reason.
Disney, when I was doing Men in Black, no pun intended, the Disney guys were concept guys over there when we did that at Columbia, and one of them was very nice to me. He was looking at my drawings and he said, "You're using too much black." And I said, "Okay." He goes, "The thing about black is it's like a magnet. It attracts your eye." And, you know, when I deal with kids that are learning this stuff, I say, show me the darkest point in this room. And it's usually under a couch or a cabinet. That's where it's blackest. Your eye's going to, if you do something and a person's moving, if you put black on the right side, your eye's going to gravitate toward that. And that's the trick, is you want to keep that viewer's eye moving all the time. That's what you want. And you want that eye to move to the next shot. It's always about the next shot. Right. Always. So you want to establish that so when they're moving, like if you have a big, long black shadow in front of this person that's walking, they're going to see that person's walking. Their eye's going to land on that black shadow. And now I always put some darkness underneath my characters so they land. Your eye, you got to really be a psychiatrist with a person's eye. Right. Now, one of the things that I hate and I despise is when I have to look at subtitles, because your eye has to take a powder and go down there and read this archaic language. If you dubbed it, people wouldn't take the time to go, and that's a fraction of a second that you really can't afford to give up when you're doing some exposition. And I despise it. I feel like I've done push-ups when I have to go in there and read subtitles. I thought, why can't you just dub it? Right. You know, so we can watch this movie. But then there are some people that don't really draw exposition, and that's fine because people are sitting around yakking. And you know, even when one of the shots I hate was when people go to the door. You know, it says down, person goes to the door. You know, come on. You know, why does it have to be so much work to watch a movie? And I'm calculating how much time it takes for your eye to move to the shadow or something to get into the next shot. I shouldn't have to stop and pack a lunch so people can read a subtitle, you know? Everybody thinks that's so sophisticated. Well, I think you're a bunch of dumbheads. That's what I think.
I like subtitles,
I think that you should go in there and dub it so everybody can understand it. Now, if it's a talkie picture, who cares? If people are sitting around pontificating or talking about how intelligent they are. Who cares? But if you're gonna like take the time to do some action and it's gonna pay off with establishment and how it's gonna land, then you should dub it. You know, the Italians are really smart about that stuff. They say, well, we don't really think that character even matches their voice. We're gonna put a different voice in there. I think that's pretty cool because, you know, you could do a movie now and they have a really handsome guy that's young and 20 years old and have John Goodman's voice in there. All of a sudden, it's pretty cool. And that's kind of what they're striking over right now is that artificial intelligence. That's part of it, you know. But the Italians have been ahead of this for years and years. Fellini, all those guys. No, he's got to have a fat voice. His voice too thin. You know, I've always appreciated that in Italian cinema. You know, but that's just me being very, very opinionated. I don't like when people have to take time out to look. And then sometimes the credits are the wrong color. You know, you have to really struggle. Not the credits, but the subtitles. Anyway.
Speaking of credits, one thing I wanted to ask you about was, let me see if I can find that. So you're not just listed as storyboard artist in films. Let's see, I just nib dipper, draw boy, pen grappler, graphite operator, visual consultant, ink and leads, hand-to-eye man, unit lemner.
Those are all Ethan's creations.
Right. Instead of storyboard artist, you get
well, you know, we thought storyboard artist was kind of boring. So, and they always cram me down there in the steerage department, you know. So it's kind of fun that Ethan would come up with all these cool names.
Right.
I only disagreed with him one time, and that was Ink Monkey. Wasn't wild about that, but he came up with Unit Lemner on that one. But that was a lot of fun because it was just beyond storyboard artists. Because by the union says I have to use storyboard artists. Before I was in the union as visual consultant, and but that's why we did it. It's a lot of fun. And you know.
And someone asked, how long does it take you to would it take you to storyboard a 2-hour feature, whole thing?
The average is probably 12 weeks. That's the average. But if you watch Mothman Prophecies, that whole bridge sequence took about 7 weeks just to see.
The bridge sequence? Oh, really?
And that was in Pittsburgh.
Right.
And that was, you know, I worked with a visual effects guy on that, not so much the director, Tom, what was that director's name? Mark Pellington. He okayed everything, but I can't remember who the visual effects guy was. You have to look it up. Great guy, wonderful guy. But when they brought me in, they had the walls lined with storyboards, and I couldn't follow any of the action. And they asked me what I wanted to do, and I said I'd like to start all over again. And one of the things that I use a lot now is models. And I had them build me a big model of the bridge in scale, a Hot Wheels scale. And so once they built that, then we could get our camera on stuff. Because back then we were doing visual effects and you couldn't really move the camera, you know. They had to have a lot of storage space, and we used NASA, I think, to store all that stuff. And that sequence took 6 to 7 weeks just to draw. And it looks good. I remember when I went back to Los Angeles after it was over with, and they showed me a rough cut. I thought, wow, that's pretty good. Because we were out in the cold snow drawing on car hoods, giving it to like second unit guys that were shooting, or camera guys or effects guys. And I remember walking away thinking nothing's ever going to cut on this picture. It never cut together, but it did. And then when I did The Dictator, we made a little animatic with my storyboards. And it was pretty fun seeing stuff cut together that actually worked, you know. But it just depends on the picture. Like, you know, on this picture we're working on now, it has these huge effect scenes. So we're spending a lot of time on just this because they're paying a lot of money, because my storyboards will end up becoming animatics, and then they put that together. And but I got to tell you, it's worth it because the action is seamless and it works so much better when you do that. When you take the time and think it through, because I've had people say, I don't understand how, if we get in a little room with a table, how you can figure all this stuff out. And I said, you just have to kind of try it, and I'll show you. But it's your imagination, like Einstein says, is your greatest asset. It really is.
A friend of mine, P, asks, she says, all motion is challenging. How is the best way to draw this, to show motion?
Well, you first understand that gravity is the law, I have a saying, and it's my saying, is that there's only two villains in movies. Only two. Nazis and gravity. How many people are hanging for their life at the end of a movie by some coolly well-dressed person smoking, Action, the way I advise young artists to figure it out is like if a pitcher is throwing a baseball, in your mind, visualize the ball leaving the hand. But when you draw it, the ball is still in the hand. Your visualization in your mind's eye should be that ball leaving, with the throw of it. But when you draw it, the ball is still there. So the energy is captured on where that ball is going to go. And there's some conventions that you can rely on. Movies like Cars are always slow. If I've said over and over again, watch Duel and watch where Steven Spielberg talks about how they made that truck fast. That's like Jaws was Duel with a fish, and they had the same problems. The only way you can really get speed and get action going is to have a background. Like showing airplanes in the sky going 300 miles an hour is really hard. You got to have something back there, like a cloud or something. Other airplanes. Anytime you get it close to the ground, you can see.
Yeah.
But action has its own conventions and rules, and part of it is upstairs in your brain before you just got to come out real loose. It can't be heavy. It has to fall out of your hand. And the way you do it is like the baseball method, where the baseball's in front of the hand. You're thinking that constantly, but when you draw it, the baseball's still in the hand, and then the energy is captured. That's one of the easiest ways I can tell people. But your mind has to track with somebody's eye, and that's part of the black method.
Okay.
And you put somebody running, and all of a sudden, the third frame in the storyboard has a big black hole. Your eye is going to go there first, and that if you go left to right, it's going to go faster than right to left. Right to left means you're going to run into something problematic. Left to right is speed. It's fast. It's downhill. Right to left is against the grain, man. It's always against the grain.
You've shot mostly for movies, but you've also shot some TV show. You shot Edge for Shane, which is a TV pilot thing. Is there a difference between storyboarding for film and television?
No. Shane's a film director, man. That's what he thinks. Movies are usually gifted with a bigger schedule, but television, that's where your experience comes into play, because you want to capture that stuff as soon as possible. When you can't, like television, man, they're always going through doors, knocking on doors. I want to talk to you. I just hate that shit. I just hate it. Oh my God! Don't tell me you're gonna go to a door. Most of the time you don't even need to get the person through the door. You can just cut to something in the room, man. Hand on gun. And then you open it up and they're in the room. Oh, how do you get there? Who cares? They got them there.
Right. Okay, so P says she has a tough time drawing hands. She draws stick figures.
Hands are tough, man. But stick figures are okay. I'll take them. We lost you in the picture.
There we are. Okay.
Yeah. The star is not here.
Oh, no.
Yeah, hands are tough. And they're tough for not just me. There are guys like Jack Davis and Mort Drucker who have mastered hands, and they look great. But there is a distinct difference between men's hands and women's hands. And you can't really labor over a woman's hands because they're always really, really specifically lithe and beautiful. A man's hands are just kind of crippled like mine. They look bad. But in the old days, I mean, if I was tired, I'd get stuck on a hand, so I'd have to get in there. But it's like all the good stuff, when you lay it, it literally has to go down in the first pass. And you don't do too much to them. Just make sure that you understand what that hand is doing, what I do now is if I'm tired, I take my Procreate, my iPad, and I take a picture of my hand, like holding this pen, and I take a picture of it, and then I go into my storyboard and I pop that picture into the storyboard and cut it out, and then I trace it. But you could, the only reason I'm doing that is because it's taking me too long to draw on hand, because there's time, is the hardest part of making a storyboard. And if I'm tired, I have a hard time drawing hands. My hands, the only thing I can say is they look like men's hands or women's hands, and they're not really specific unless we're doing like a hand on a gun is a little difficult, Again, it's the first pass, man. If I can get it in the first pass, fine. If it's the second and third pass, freehand, then I'll take a picture of my own hands and I'll trace it. That's what I'll do.
And you do also recommend tracing, because I've seen,
I think tracing's great. I've been tracing ever since I got into this business. I trace my own work, so it's not cheating.
And if a director traces something for you, you take it, and then, or draw something for you, take it, and then you trace.
I pop a picture and put it in there, and that's exactly. I'll refine it so that it'll look more like a picture. I'll make the table more. I'll get my perspective straight. But it's what he wants or she wants. Don't get me wrong. I work with a lot of women directors. Okay, so if I say he, I'm sorry. But it's what the director wants. We had a picture laying here on the table of something that Shane had drawn, which was really good. Here's something Shane has drawn. Oh, here it is. Now, usually Shane doesn't have the time to draw. He doesn't. But we were just talking, and that's a really good drawing because he can draw. But he'll hardly ever, because you want to keep that speed of him making a movie. So he'll go really rough, like this right down here. I'll trace that because I know where the eye line is and everything. I'll pop a picture of that baby, and then I have these frames on my pad, and then I'll just trace I'll register the frame, and like there's another one where there's money flying. What that is that there's a bullet hitting the table and the money's flying. I know just enough to trace that and how I'm going to make it work, because I know the angle, and I do that all the time. Once in a while, even with Ethan's drawings, I'll trace one. But it's just to make sure that we get what they want. It's not because it's a better drawing or anything. It's specifically to get what the director wants. You have to go in their heads with a flashlight and look around. And this is one of the ways of doing it,
And P also wants to know, she draws with stick figures.
Nothing wrong with that.
But crowds and groups, she said, looks like a kindergartner's attempt at geometry.
Nothing wrong with that. As long as it's what's in your brain, I can figure it out. If I can't draw it, you can't shoot it. That's the way it works. That's my job. My job is to give you specifically what you want. If you're showing balloons with sticks, you'll probably put a face on there, and I instantly know where the eye line is. Boom, just like that. And I'll go in there and trace that baby and turn it into a drawing. There's nothing wrong with tracing. In fact, people don't understand that tracing is not bad. It's how you make a tighter. There was a comic book artist years ago. He drew Batman. He told me, he goes, "Why don't you go in there and trace your drawings? You'll have a cleaner drawing." He's right. Because on Raising Arizona, I didn't trace much on that movie. I just went in and just did another drawing. And it's years and years of experience where we figured things out together, on how to do stuff. And
are there some movies you worked on that you really, really enjoyed?
You're still not in the camera.
Oh, there we go. Are there films you've worked on that you really?
Oh yeah. But you know what? This is a job. You're going to end up doing films and working with people you don't like. But for the most part, I've been pretty lucky. I've worked with great people, and it's always about the people you work with. Sometimes it doesn't work out. You either get fired or you quit. One of the two. When you do 3 and 5 movies a year, the chances of that happening are greater. Always. We don't make fan belts. We don't shoot screws. We make movies. So you're going to run into creative differences. And my job is not to tell you this is better. It's to try to get what you want. And generally, when people want to argue with me, I only argue with them once. That's it. I say, okay, move on. You know?
And if the Coens call, you'll always go.
Always.
Yeah.
I am loyal to those guys.
Yeah.
Those guys set my career, and you know, and there's a handful of people I'm always loyal to. Those are the people that treated me right through the years, like Shane and a few more people, man. I've never transitioned into a director, so I've always been available as a storyboard artist. So, but it means a lot. You surround yourself with people who are better than you are, and you're loyal to them. You know, that's what you do.
What resources do you recommend for beginner storyboard artists?
Well, you got to be able to draw on napkins and stuff like that with pens, and then you photograph it, you know, with your iPad, or else you copy it, you know. But the resource is your brain, man. You got to go watch movies. If you watch a lot, you know, like when I'm not working, I'm watching movies.
Right.
I'm a very dull person. You know,
We watch The Fugitive.
We watch The Fugitive because that's a great series, man. Not the movie, the television show. And I'm always watching something. I'm always watching something. And I'll stay up till 4 a.m, just like I did when I was a kid, and start another movie at 3 o'clock. You know, it's just, I'm not saying that everybody should do that, but you should watch a lot of movies, you know.
It makes it easier for your frames of reference too.
Well, you know, movies have standard conventions.
Right.
They really do. Although they're always kind of different. Like I always say, there's only 2 elements in a movie that you're going to work with, and that's suspense and surprise. And everything else is just filling it in. You know, your storytelling is the most important part. You have to be story oriented. Everything has to turn into a story with an establishment and a payoff. And you want to turn that story into something that people can watch and enjoy. And the suspense and surprise are 2 of the elements that you're always going to exercise. Like I said, Nazis and gravity, man. Those are things you can count on, you know, on working in a movie. There are conventions, like first 5 pages, something has to happen. Around page 20, something has to happen. Around page 70 to 90, something has to happen. And then you have to wrap it up. And you have to establish this stuff. You know, the brothers were the most brilliant guys I ever saw in establishing stuff. They established it. But those are the things. Drawing is a really handy tool to be able to do. But you don't have to be a great drawer. You just have to be able to, you can storyboard a whole movie just by doing overheads, you know. And that's how you get around storyboarding, not hiring an artist. You know, like I just recently had somebody who was complaining about my day rate, and I said, okay. And the person says, well, maybe I can just hire a student or something to draw. I said, go ahead, be my guest. There's plenty of artists out there. There's a lot more to it than just drawing. There really is.
So you would recommend anyone storyboard a film first before going into?
Oh God, yeah. And you know, I did hit upon over the shoulder and people talking, but I can tell you this. From when I learned on Burn After Reading, we were going to not storyboard that. But they decided to. And Ethan said, well, there's so many over the shoulders. Nothing's really happening. So, but Chivo, the cinematographer, he said, oh, we must do this. We must do this. And I got to tell you, because we went over the shoulder and we drew every frame, processed it, it's a different movie. So you do get something out of it. You know, you start into finding out how boring you really are. And then you say, we got to pepper this up, man, because this is just another person over the shoulder. And because I remember on Barton Fake, Ethan was complaining, he's gone to the door again, you know? So you end up hearing him go to the door from the other side. Because they got tired of him going to the door. He calls out, I'm complaining about this guy, and then John Goodman's next door, and you hear his feet next door, and then brief pause. See how he turned that around and turned it into something interesting. Where that's the problem with movies, you'll just go out and shoot them, and you won't think about when you process it as a storyboard, then you understand immediately that, oh, this is getting a little slow here, man.
And so all that you figured out when you were storyboarding it.
Yeah. Because there's so many movies, when you just do a standard operational move or a conventional move, you don't realize how slow it is. And my little alarm bell goes off in my head. Whoa, we are too slow here. We got to figure out how to cover this and cut to it. That's what we got to do. Because, you can be as slow as you want in the beginning of the movie. You really can. But you better have that all worked out by the end of the movie, because people don't want to sit around and wait for you to show up with a coffee on the end part of the movie.
And one of the last questions, for those indie filmmakers here filming for themselves on a micro budget, how would you recommend storyboarding the least amount but most necessary boards to provide the best effect?
Overhead. Do a set of overheads on everything. Figure out your room, your scale, where the camera is, and that way the DP can read it.
Okay.
When you get overhead, the world changes for you as a filmmaker. Like I talk about how irritated I am when people knock on doors.
Yeah.
And when they get outside, what do? They have people getting in and out of cars.
Right.
And you got this vast expanse of outside to work with. You got a lot of room to work there. But if you're going to draw an overhead of that, you'll probably start with a car and where the walkway is in the house. What's over here? Is there a water tower over here? What's over here? Is it just buildings? Is there cars parked? Is it an intersection? All of a sudden, you're building your movie with an overhead. And that's what I highly recommend to everybody that wants to make a film, can't afford an artist. Do your overheads, and anybody can do that. I have a system that I present to people on how to do that, how a camera looks, how a person looks. For instance, you'll notice in my storyboards, I always darken if the person's back's to the camera, I darken that up. Same way on overhead, the back of their head. The carrot is where their nose is. You know where your eye line is. Boom, just like that, And the best part, as I said before, you know where your line of action is. I've seen people argue for, it seems like hours about that line of action. But when you do an overhead, you instantly got to figure it out. Just like that. And I'm hardly ever wrong on it. Hardly ever, because that's the first thing I do is go for an overhead. That's why I use a lot of models now.
Right.
Like when there's action, like we just did a racetrack scene, we had horses and people. And, like No Country for Old Men or True Grit, we had a canyon, and we had little guys down there. And you can stand over them like they're God and just say, oh, yeah, that's where the camera goes.
Okay. Well, one final question. What advice do you have when it comes to storyboarding for filmmakers and storyboard artists? Starting off.
Get paid, man. This ain't no hobby.
Right.
Get paid,
And it's not important to be a great artist, per se.
I think as long as you can draw, you can do an eye line. If you have your hands around perspective and how it works, because when you go to drawing school, they have these tablatures of lines, and
right.
It doesn't work that way. We deal with lenses.
Right.
You should go out, take your little iPhone and shoot like 3 pages of script and shoot it yourself and see how hard it is to cut it together. I always know the storyboards are snapping when I'm going through them and they're cutting together. I can see the pace and tone
Right.
just by flipping the pages. Shane's really brilliant about that. He'll come at me with fragments and ideas, and then by the third pass, man, all of a sudden it starts snapping together. And I love that. It's just like in the old days when you put a piece of paper in the vat and the photograph would go, I love that back then. It's that way. If you have a reasonable handle, like, people draw for me all the time, like your person with stick figures, I'll take them. Give them to me, man. I'll take any information you have. And it doesn't matter how badly you draw. It really doesn't. We're not doing an art show here. We're here making a movie. If you get from point A to point B and everybody can read it, fine. But I think the first and the easiest step is to draw an overhead. Learn how to do it. Everything's in scale when you do that. Everything.
And finally, again, here's the book, the Big Lebowski, the official storyboards. It's a fantastic book. It really is. And you can actually watch the movie and go through it
You
and
see how close we got.
you see how close,
You see how close we got, man.
So and anyway, thank you so much, my friend.
It's my pleasure.
You know,
because we all know that the film critics adore you.
you know, no, we've known each other about 5 years now.
Yeah, man,
and,
we're always here around this flurry of making movies, no matter what.
right, and
and that's all this place is about, is making movies. That's all we do and talk about around here.
You know, I came here for 3 weeks, dude. And it's been a few more than 3 weeks.
And that's one of the nicest things about this place is that if you've gotten away from it like I do, and you come here, you're immersed in it. Because somebody is always talking about making a movie.
Right.
Always. And if you're a pro, that's very important. You need to keep your chops up.
It's been a lot of fun. So thank you again, Jay.
Thanks a lot, everyone.